I remember that day. It was September 20th, 1942. We stood on the tarmac at Naval Air Station North Island, San Diego, California. Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders sat in that enemy cockpit. He gripped the control stick of a plane that should not exist in American hands. I could see the sweat on his palms, despite the cool morning air rolling off the Pacific. The instrument panel before him displayed characters in Japanese. The controls felt foreign. The entire cockpit smelled of oil and alien materials. Beyond the windscreen, armed guards surrounded the hangar. Their orders had been clear since the precious cargo arrived 3 weeks earlier. This was the most valuable aircraft in the world. Sanders was about to become the first American to fly it. He released the brakes. The Mitsubishi A6M2 Model 2110 fighter rolled forward. Its engine purred with a surprising, deadly smoothness. This single test flight was everything. Within minutes, it would expose weaknesses. It would transform American fighter tactics. It would doom Japan's aerial supremacy. The secrets locked inside this captured machine were the key. They would help create a weapon that would shoot down over 5,000 enemy aircraft. They would turn the tide of the Pacific War. But the transformation did not begin there. It began 5 months earlier, on a small, rain-soaked island, June 4th, 1942. We were fighting the Battle of Midway that same day. Just 300 meters to the east, American dive bombers were destroying 4 Japanese aircraft carriers. That battle forever changed the course of the Pacific War. But in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, a smaller drama was unfolding. It would prove equally transformative. 19-year-old Flight Petty Officer First Class Tadayoshi Koga launched his Zero fighter. He flew from the carrier Ryujo. It was part of a diversionary strike against the American base at Dutch Harbor. The morning mission went according to plan initially. Koga and his wingman, Chief Petty Officer Makoto Endo and Petty Officer Shigomo Shikard, attacked Dutch Harbor. The effect was devastating. They shot down an American PBY Catalina patrol bomber. They strafed survivors in the water. The Zero performed exactly as designed. It was faster and more maneuverable than anything we had. Then, a single bullet changed everything. Ground fire from Dutch Harbor, likely from a .50 caliber machine gun, struck Koga's aircraft. It severed the oil return line. In that engine, it was a death sentence. Oil began spraying from the damaged line. Koga knew he had perhaps 15 minutes before the engine seized completely. He radioed his flight commander about the damage. He turned toward Akutan Island, 25 miles east of Dutch Harbor. Japanese planners had designated it an emergency landing site. A submarine waited offshore to rescue downed pilots. As Koga approached Akutan Island, he spotted what appeared to be a perfect field. It was a long stretch of flat grassland, half a mile inland from Broad Bight. His wingman circled above. Koga extended his landing gear for what should have been routine. Shikard, flying overhead, suddenly noticed a horror. Water was glistening between the grass stalks. On his second pass, he realized the field was actually a bog. The grass concealed knee-deep mud and standing water. He tried to radio a warning. It was too late. Koga was already committed to his landing. The Zero's wheels touched the grass at approximately 80 miles per hour. For a brief moment, the landing seemed successful. Then the main gear sank into the soft mud beneath the vegetation. They caught with tremendous force. Physics took over. The lightweight fighter, its tail still traveling at landing speed, flipped completely over. It was a violent cartwheel. The aircraft slammed upside down into the bog. The impact was bone-crushing. The force snapped Koga's neck instantly. He died before he could draw another breath. His service pistol and samurai sword were still strapped to his waist. His flight suit was pristine, except for the precise medical taping wrapped around his torso from previous injuries. Above, Koga's wingmen faced an agonizing decision. Standing orders required them to destroy any disabled Zero. They circled the crash site multiple times, machine guns ready. The aircraft appeared so intact, it sat upside down in the marsh like a turtle on its back. They could not bring themselves to fire. Perhaps Koga was alive, trapped, waiting for rescue. They could not murder their friend. After several more passes, their fuel running low, they reluctantly turned west. They returned to the Ryujo.
For 5 weeks, Koga Zero sat undisturbed in the Akutan bog. The crash site lay out of sight of standard routes. It was hidden in a small valley. The perpetual Aleutian fog offered perhaps 6 days of clear visibility per month. Then, on July 10, 1942, an American PBY Catalina patrol bomber piloted by Lieutenant William Thies became lost. Navigation in the Aleutians was treacherous. Thies was navigating by dead reckoning. He spotted the Shumagon Islands through a break in the clouds. He corrected course for Dutch Harbor. He chose to fly directly over Akutan Island to save time and fuel. Machinist mate Albert Knack, serving as plane captain, happened to glance down. Through a temporary gap in the fog, he spotted the shape. It was unusual. The bright red circles on the wings were unmistakable. Thies circled the site several times. He noted the position carefully on his charts. The Zero appeared remarkably intact. He immediately returned to Dutch Harbor to report the discovery. Within hours, a recovery party landed near the crash site. What they found exceeded our wildest hopes. The marsh had acted like a giant shock absorber. The airframe was fundamentally intact. Aside from a crushed windscreen, bent propeller tips, broken landing gear, and damaged wingtips, the aircraft was sound. The recovery team carefully removed Koga's body from the cockpit. They buried him with military honors on a hillside. They noted the extensive medical taping around his torso. His personal effects, including his pistol and sword, were removed as intelligence materials. Then began the challenging task: extracting a fighter aircraft from an Aleutian bog. The recovery operation took nearly 3 weeks of backbreaking labor. We were working in some of the most inhospitable conditions on Earth. Workers constructed a makeshift road using logs and planking. They slowly winched the captured fighter across a half-mile of treacherous ground to Broadbight. There, it was loaded onto a barge. By late July, the Zero was aboard a cargo ship. It departed the Aleutians in early August. The vessel arrived in Seattle on August 1, 1942. It was immediately transferred to a barge. Its destination was Naval Air Station North Island near San Diego. The aircraft reached San Diego in mid-August. It was unloaded under heavy guard. It was moved to a secure hangar. 24-hour military police protection ensured no one could damage the invaluable prize. Word spread through Navy aviation circles with electric excitement. For the first time since the Zero's devastating debut at Pearl Harbor, we could examine the legendary fighter. Navy Captain William Leonard called it a treasure that unlocked so many secrets at a time when the need was so great. Marine Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Walsh later said, knowing what to do with a Zero on his tail, information from this aircraft saved his life several times. The race was on. We had to restore the Zero to flying condition as quickly as possible. Every grounded day was another day our pilots faced an enemy we did not fully understand. The restoration team worked around the clock. They documented every detail of the aircraft's construction. They repaired the crash damage simultaneously. The work proceeded with astonishing speed, driven by urgency. The restoration revealed immediate insights into Japanese design. The Zero was built like a precision watch. It had flush rivets and guns mounted flush to minimize drag. Every component was for minimum weight and maximum efficiency. The instrument panel displayed remarkable simplicity. It weighed between 5,300 and 6,165 pounds fully loaded, roughly 2,000 pounds lighter than the American F4F Wildcat. This extraordinary weight saving came with a fatal cost. The Zero lacked armor protection for the pilot. The fuel tanks were not self-sealing. It traded safety for performance. The Zero was a different philosophy. It sacrificed protection for agility. The captured aircraft revealed other secrets. The engine was a 14-cylinder Nakajima Sakai radial, producing approximately 950 horsepower. It used a float-type carburetor that would prove significant. The armament was formidable. 2 7.7mm machine guns and 2 20mm cannons in the wings. By September 20th, just 41 days after arriving in San Diego, the Zero was ready. We had replaced the crushed windscreen. We straightened the vertical stabilizer and rudder. We completely rebuilt the landing gear. The original 3-blade Sumitomo propeller was reused. The captured aircraft was repainted. The red Japanese Hinamaru rounds were covered with American Blue Circle and White Star insignia. It looked like an American aircraft wearing Japanese clothes. Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders, the chief test pilot, had spent the previous week studying every aspect of the aircraft. He sat in the cockpit for hours. He familiarized himself with the Japanese instruments. He was an experienced pilot, but he was about to fly an enemy aircraft whose characteristics were only guessed from combat. If the reports were wrong, he might not survive the first flight. On the morning of September 20th, 1942, Sanders climbed into the Zero's cockpit as pilot. Ground crew started the engine. It caught immediately and ran smoothly. Sanders taxied to the runway. Dozens of engineers, intelligence officers, and Navy brass were watching. He advanced the throttle. The Zero accelerated down the runway with surprising eagerness. The lightweight fighter lifted off after a remarkably short ground roll. It climbed at an impressive rate. For the next hour, Sanders put the Zero through a series of performance tests. He carefully explored its flight envelope. What he discovered in that first flight would change everything.
Immediately apparent was a fact that the ailerons froze up at speeds above 200 knots. Rolling maneuvers became slow. They require great force on the stick. Sanders wrote in his report, "The Zero rolled to the left, much easier than to the right." The high-speed aileron problem was dramatic and unexpected. At low speeds, the Zero's maneuverability was everything claimed. It could turn inside any American fighter with ease. But above 200 knots, roughly 230 miles per hour, the ailerons became heavy and unresponsive. The fabric-covered control surfaces ballooned with air pressure. American fighters, with their metal-covered surfaces and hydraulic boost, maintained full control. Sanders discovered a second critical weakness. During negative acceleration maneuvers, when he pushed the stick forward sharply, the Zero's engine coughed and died. The float-type carburetor could not maintain fuel flow during sustained negative acceleration. For several seconds, the Zero became a powerless glider. This had profound tactical implications. Sanders recognized them immediately. American pilots being outmaneuvered now had their answer. Sanders noted in his report, "Go into a vertical power dive using negative acceleration if possible. At about 200 knots, roll hard right at high speed where the Zero could not follow. American fighters should use their superior armor and firepower. Team tactics should replace individual dogfighting. These recommendations were compiled and distributed throughout the fleet with unprecedented speed. Pilots received detailed briefings. The information was incorporated into training programs. Combat veterans who had survived early encounters suddenly understood how to win. The impact on pilot morale was profound. For 8 months, American naval aviators had faced an aircraft that seemed invincible. The official American tactic had been simply to run away. Now, for the first time, American pilots had concrete knowledge. The mystique began to crumble. The Akutan Zero's greatest contribution was not just tactical. It was to the fighter already under development, the Grumman F-6F Hellcat. The connection has been subject to debate. The truth lies in parallel development and timely intelligence. In January 1942, at Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, Bethpage, Long Island, New York, Leroy Grumman reviewed preliminary designs. The initial XF6F1 was planned around the Wright R260 Cyclone engine, producing 1,700 horsepower. The early months of 1942 brought alarming reports from the Pacific. The F4F Wildcat was proving inadequate. On April 22, 1942, 6 weeks before the Battle of Midway, Lieutenant Commander Edward Butch O'Hare, fresh from earning the Medal of Honor, met with Grumman engineers. His insights were sobering. He emphasized that American fighters needed more power, better climb rate, and improved visibility. He had told President Franklin Roosevelt, a plane that will go upstairs faster. The Bureau of Aeronautics, through Lieutenant Commander A.M. Jackson, directed specific design changes. Jackson emphasized mounting the cockpit higher. He stressed, "You cannot hit them if you cannot see them." These changes were incorporated before Koga's Zero was even discovered. On April 26, 1942, 5 weeks before Koga's final flight, a critical decision was made. The Bureau of Aeronautics directed Grumman to install a more powerful engine. The Wright R260 was abandoned in favor of the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, an 18-cylinder radial engine producing 2,000 horsepower. This was a 50% increase in power. The first XF6F-1 prototype, still with the old engine, flew on June 26, 1942. This was 8 days before Koga crashed. The second prototype, designated XF6F-3 and fitted with the 2,000 horsepower R2800 Double Wasp, first flew on July 30, 1942. This was 20 days after the Akutan Zero was discovered. But the Akutan Zero arrived in mid-August in San Diego. Detailed technical data flowed to Grumman within days. The intelligence arrived at a critical moment. The basic design was set, but production had not yet begun. Changes could still be incorporated. Grumman engineers studied the data intensely. They realized the F6F would weigh over 12,000 pounds, more than double the Zero's weight. Roy Grumman made a key decision. The F6F would match the Zero's performance, but without sacrificing pilot armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, and robust fuselage structure. The weight penalty would be overcome by the raw power of the R2800 engine. The F6F would be built tough.
The data from the Akutan Zero influenced specific final design decisions. The F6F's ailerons were hydraulically boosted and metal-covered. They ensured full control authority at all speeds. This directly addressed the high-speed aileron problem Sanders discovered. The F6F's fuel system used a pressure carburetor. It ensured the engine would continue running under negative acceleration. This eliminated the second weakness Sanders had exploited. The F6F structure was designed for 9G positive and 6G negative acceleration, far exceeding the Zero's limits. The armament package was increased to 6.5 caliber machine guns. On October 3, 1942, the first production F6F-3 made its maiden flight, just 2 weeks after Sanders completed his initial test flights. The timing was not coincidental. Production was delayed until the latest intelligence was incorporated. The first production F6F-3s began reaching fleet squadrons in early 1943. Fighting Squadron 9 received the first operational Hellcats in February 1943. The pilots were enthusiastic. The F6F felt like a quantum leap. Production ramped up with astonishing speed. At peak production in 1944, Grumman produced 644 aircraft in a single month, 1 Hellcat per hour. Between the first production flight and the end of the war in November 1945, Grumman produced 12,275 F6F Hellcats from a single factory. The F6F made its combat debut on August 31, 1943, 15 months after the Akutan Zero was discovered. Aircraft from Fighting Squadrons 5 and 9 attacked Marcus Island. The mission was an overwhelming success. The F6F demonstrated immediate superiority. By early 1944, the Hellcat was the dominant American naval fighter. The tactical lessons learned from the Zero were incorporated. Pilots used high-speed slashing attacks. They avoided slow-speed turning fights. The Thatch weave became standard defensive doctrine. The tactic neutralized the Zero's turning advantage. November 23, 1943, Gilbert Islands. F6F Hellcats engaged Zeros over Tarawa. 30 Zeros rose to intercept. American pilots claimed 30 Japanese fighters destroyed for the loss of a single F6F. The Battle of Tarawa validated everything. The age of Japanese air superiority was ending. June 19, 1944, Philippine Sea, west of the Marianas Islands. F6F Hellcats from 15 American carrier faced the largest Japanese carrier force since Midway. What followed was the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The first Japanese strike, 69 aircraft, lost 42 before they could even reach the fleet. The second wave, 107 Japanese aircraft, lost 97 before they could even attack. Japanese carrier aviation was systematically destroyed. Japanese carriers launched 370 aircraft, only 130 returned. American losses totaled 23 to 30 aircraft. The strategic impact was catastrophic for Japan. Japanese naval aviation would never recover. The F6F was operating at peak effectiveness. By the end of World War II, F6F Hellcats had compiled a dominant record. The aircraft was credited with destroying 5,163 enemy aircraft in Pacific air-to-air combat by the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. With an additional 60 aircraft destroyed in other theaters, the total was 5,223. Only 270 F6Fs were lost in air-to-air combat.
This gave the aircraft an overall kill-to-loss ratio of 19-1. Against Japanese Zero specifically, the ratio was 13-1. The F-6F produced between 305 and 307 Navy Hellcat aces. The Navy's top ace, Commander David McCampbell, scored all 34 of his victories flying F-6Fs. The Hellcat's dominance created zero fatigue among Japanese pilots. By 1945, Japanese pilots were fleeing from Hellcats. The transformation was complete. The Akutan Zero's importance is undeniable. It provided the first detailed intelligence. Sanders' test flights revealed specific weaknesses. The technical data influenced F-6F design decisions at a crucial moment. Japanese historian and Air Self-Defense Force Lieutenant General Masataki Okumiya stated the acquisition was no less serious than the Japanese defeat at Midway. The physical aircraft was destroyed in February 1945, ironically, in a training accident. An SB-2C Helldiver dive bomber lost control and crashed into the parked Zero. Its propeller sliced the Japanese fighter into pieces. William Leonard salvaged several gauges. Koga's body, initially buried on Akutan Island, was exhumed in 1947. In 1953, his remains, likely among 236 bodies, were returned to Japan for burial. The young pilot, who died at age 19, became an unwitting contributor to his nation's defeat. Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders lived to see the F-6F's combat success. His careful test flights, detailed reports, and analytical insights contributed directly to American tactical doctrine. The Zero in 1942 was arguably the world's best carrier fighter, but America's ability to produce thousands of F-6Fs and combine them with sound tactical intelligence overwhelmed it. The F-6F Hellcat was industrial might. The Akutan Zero was fortune's gift. Together, they created an unstoppable synergy. The young Japanese pilot could not have known his preserved fighter would contribute to defeat. His wingmen, hoping he survived, could not have known their mercy would doom thousands of their comrades. And Eddie Sanders, taxiing that captured Zero, could not have fully appreciated his role. The Akutan Zero was a moment when chance and preparation intersected. The F-6F Hellcat was its legacy. One captured aircraft, one skilled test pilot. The convergence of intelligence, design, and tactical doctrine created a weapon system that achieved a 19-1 kill ratio. It swept Japanese aviation from Pacific skies. The transformation of American naval aviation from underdog to dominant force happened through this synergy. The Akutan Zero revealed the exploitable weaknesses. The F-6F Hellcat was designed and employed to exploit them ruthlessly. The 19-1 kill ratio was the inevitable result. The story of how one test pilot's captured Zero turned the F-6F Hellcat into a 19-1 killing machine demonstrates that warfare is decided not just by courage and firepower, but by intelligence, adaptation, and the ability to learn from the enemy.